Hello, everyone, and welcome back to VectoScalar Tech Talk Show. As you know, VectoScalar Tech Talk Show is an online live show and technology and digital transformation shared by senior tech leaders and global thought leaders. I'm the host, Vikas Jain. VectoScalar is a technology pioneer serving large enterprises to startups to build enterprise softwares and mobile application. In this episode, our guest speaker, Dr. Roque Martinez, also known as Rocky, is going to cover the strategic approach to digital transformation. Before I invite Rocky, let me give you a quick background about his corporate journey. So, an executive with over 30 years of experience with corporate and startup experience, a hands on technology executive with a successful track record in delivering sophisticated software in complex environments, demonstrated ability to provide mission and vision and execute on strategy. Welcome, Rocky, to VectoScalar Tech Talk Show.
Thank you, Vickers. Thank you for having me today.
Okay, thanks. What is the time in your part of the world from where you're joining today?
It is 8:30 Eastern Time, GMT -5.
Okay, thanks. So before we start further interaction, and it is for the audience, whenever you have any question, you can type in the comment below, and I'll be gradually taking those questions with Rocky. So Rocky, would you like to share about your corporate experience and what you currently deliver in your current organization?
Sure. So currently, what I deliver is basically the ability to disrupt the way companies access data, which they normally do within their four walls. We provide the ability to take that data, stack, cleanse, and normalize it, and then give it back to any organization in a way that's totally usable without any other interference from human or other machine transactions.
Okay, that sounds interesting. Quite a disruptive kind of work. So, what is digital transformation for you?
So digital transformation for me is not only, when we started using that term many years ago, it was connecting two departments or electronically, or trying to break down silos electronically. The term to me now means the ability to remove any friction within any organization using, it could be a shared Excel spreadsheet on Office 360, or it could be an entire new pipe that connects two different disparate organizations. But the whole point is you want to eliminate any market friction that's causing your organization to be slower, to be not responsive to the customer, to create um, more opportunity. So anytime you can do that, to me, is a digital disruption, right? And using some form of appropriate technology to do that is how you create more value. All of this is to create more value, not necessarily to create more technology.
Okay, that sounds interesting. When you mentioned that even using some spreadsheet or small automation itself can be part of digital transformation. It may not always require that unless we install or implement big solutions and mission critical software, then only it is digital transformation. That's quite an interesting perspective. So, in last 1 to 2 years, what kind of digital disruption that you have seen happening in the marketplace?
So, I mean, some of the big ticket items, a lot of distributed ledger. There are lots of applications now that are outside of currency that are doing some great things. Simple, like validating if someone's graduated from a university. I mean, anybody who's done that kind of work knows it's very painful, especially if you're a doctor or an accountant, or you have any kind of certificate based professional service where those types of validations need to have it. It's very hard, right? So you have to send an email, or you have to fax something if there's still a fax. You have And it takes a long time. But using distributed ledger with access to the ledger, which means you can't change it, a doctor now can be validated in any, well, in the US can be validated by any state using this chain if the school is participating. So something that took months can now take literally seconds. In financial markets, the same thing. If you're validating the terms for a specific deal, especially on collateralized debt or uh, some of the fixed income products, getting that information out is very hard. But now using a digital, a distributed ledger, you can do that fairly easy. Reference data. How many times have companies have lost money because each side has a different version of what should be only one type of reference data? So those are the big ticket items that those are the things that I've kind of been working on or advising on. Um, lower, even within some organizations, my organization, just using Office 360, not to pass around spreadsheets for different types of workflows has made things that took days to literally minutes, because you're now removing the friction, the human friction that gets created when something's got to be passed on. So if you could digitally access it and everybody sees only one truth, now you have disrupted whatever process it is. So either if it's a small one that took 5 days, you make it hours. That's a change. That's removing friction, creating value, increasing revenue.
Okay, that's an important insight. So, what is the role of strategy here? Why it is important to have a strategy when we are planning a digital transformation?
So it's important to have strategy because you can get very lost in technology, as a lot of people here who are watching, and yourself. You can start down, say, I need to have uh, an application that basically logs me in to validate who I am. And then suddenly it starts taking on a life of, well, I need to know what location I'm in or what type of device I'm on. And then 8 months later, you haven't delivered anything and you spent lots of money and there's no been value added to anything, but you spent 8 months building something. So having the strategy gives you a focus that lets you get to a completion quickly. So an easy kind of simple idea is, uh, my strategy is to make sure um, that all of my trades are settled within 6 hours because of T+1, right? And we notice that all of our breaks are on reference data. Well, hey, let's just focus on getting the reference data right, regardless of where it comes from, so that we can then make sure that we settle in 6 hours, right? So without having that strategy, without that focus, your projects can go very quickly at crazy because there's no focus and idea or value that you're trying to bring to make something worth that investment that you're making.
Okay, so it's important to focus and also to keep in mind that where we are going to end, that what is going to be the completion, so that we can backtrack and achieve that goal.
Yeah,
That
and
makes a lot of sense.
right, and also you got to make sure that you take the customer into consideration, right? So many of us, so there's a saying that many of us look in the mirror but don't look out the window, right? So you have to look out the window, look at the customer, understand what the customer is feeling, to understand what your strategy needs to be, because a lot of companies use strategy basically to maneuver internally, but it doesn't bring any value to the customer. So why bother? I mean, there are times you need to do internal work, but it has to have a focus and a strategy to have external, looking out the window to make sure that there's an understanding of why this is happening. And it makes it easier to communicate that up and down, from the CEO down to the employee that is doing the everyday task. And without that, people get disjointed and you lose value, you lose the focus.
Yeah, that makes sense. So while I have a few other questions, I see a question coming from the one of the viewers. So let me take up that question. So Saddam Hussein is asking, what are the potential risks and challenges associated with digital transformation?
Well, the risks are that you don't have your the leadership and the middle leadership don't have a coherent strategy or coherent understanding of where they want to go, right? So if the strategy is we just want to do better or we just want to generate more revenue, that's not really a strategy, right? That's the output of strategy. Revenue is the output of strategy. So your potential risk is not understanding what exactly you really want to do. And there's plenty of examples that in history where not having that strategy has caused companies to go out of business. Now, the challenge with even if you have a good strategy, especially in a large organization, is you have lots of silos, lots of people who want to keep the way things are because A, they're comfortable, B, it makes them feel good, and C, they feel that it's the right way. So the challenge is not only to create the strategy, but to make sure that across the organization, however big or small, that organization understands why the strategy is being created and why they have to all change to make sure that the outcome is a bigger, better organization with happier clients, which usually ends up with more revenue. And if you don't do all of that, and it doesn't have to be 100%, you have to do it. You have to get more than 60, 70% of your organization going towards the same goal, then the rest will follow, and then you'll have the best outcome. So to put it in a nutshell, the risk is you have a strategy that really doesn't make sense for your customers, and the challenges are making sure, even if you have a good strategy, that the whole organization understands it and all marching or working towards the same goals, the same strategy.
Okay, that's make a lot of sense, and I hope Saddam that answers your question as well. So that reminds me of one saying where I don't know the who said this, but no war is won as per the strategy, but still no war is fought without a strategy.
Yeah. It's the Chinese general Shang Shu who said no plan survives the battle, right? So,
Right.
but if you understand where everybody's trying to go, then you can adjust and get to where you have to go.
That makes a lot of sense. So, as we can see, there is a lot of importance about having a great strategy. So, does every strategy have to be a big bang strategy, the big thing?
No, so and that's why I bring up two sides of you have the very heavy technology, big organization change, and then just a simple spreadsheet in Office 360 that everybody can manage or look at. Um, the the strategies. So there's a saying, lead from where you are. So if you're a department manager and you realize that your organization, your department is dysfunction, you can create your own department strategy on how we're going to serve our internal clients better. And then that can be infectious and then cause other departments to do it, or even small teams. So any leader should lead from where they're at and take the idea of defining a mission and a vision and a strategy to make their group better, which will then force other groups to get better, and then eventually it'll rise from the top to the top rather. And so it's important that especially team leads, department heads, don't feel that the strategy has to come from the top. I mean, there's going to be certain high level goals that you're going to have, but that doesn't mean you can't take it upon yourself to create your own strategy to make sure you have a way of leading the people around you, right? So I always kind of get nervous when I hear some of the people that have worked for me in the past to say, well, I have no strategy. I don't know what I'm doing. Well, you do. You've been given goals for the year. You can wrap that up and create a mission and a vision and strategy for your group of people. And so the big message out of that is don't wait for someone to create this for you. Do it yourself. and make the group around you better, and that will actually make the other groups around you better, and then it'll make the bigger organization better.
Okay, that makes sense. So I have a couple of questions in the pipeline. Let me take one question where Harshit Goyal is asking, what are our key digital strength and weaknesses? Probably he's asking in the context of an organization, that how do we identify that our digital strength and weaknesses?
Well, so thinking off the top of my head here. So you're when you're looking for digital strengths, you're looking for what has enabled you to satisfy your customers' needs in a reliable and functional method. So, for example, if a department only, for whatever reason, takes requests via email, that's a weakness. That's a digital weakness because there are plenty of tools out there. Even within my organization, many years ago, we used to only take technology changes via email. And one of the things I realized is that didn't make sense anymore. So we went and we got a provider that allowed us to have a conversation, a digital conversation within our organization. And what that provided, the strength was, now I wasn't waiting for someone to engage and an email could get lost and all the kinds of other stuff that could happen with the email, which is the weakness. The strength is now I had a digital conversation. Lots of people could see the request. Lots of people can then react to that request. And now what took weeks and weeks, maybe even months to get done, we could get it done fairly quickly within a day or so because there was no more friction, right? So internally, if you have an organization or a group or a set of people that just don't have the ability to start conversations digitally and get that workflow done, um, then you need to start having a kind of a tough conversation because in this day and age there are plenty of tools to make that happen. One of the other thing about digital strategy is you don't have to write everything. As technologists, people feel that there has to be written everything. We got to write it in. No, there are tools out there. Why spend double the money to get half the or even a quarter of the performance? Go find a partner that has exactly what you need, or even 80%, because you're going to get started on your journey much faster, and you'll have the ability to actually break down the walls and create efficiencies that allow your organization to be better, right? So when you're looking internally, what are those what are those processes that just don't flow? And look at those and figure out how you can get those. Even if it was a digital project from 5 years ago, the world has moved on. What other automations can you add now to make it better?
Yeah, so that's an interesting observation, as you mentioned, that we can keep on looking that what, even if it is a small project or the small improvement, let's keep on looking for even those small improvements. So broadly, we can say it's kind of pursuit of getting better. That on each day, every day, we are trying to get it better, and especially focused on the customer-centered innovations. That how customer is at the center, how each and everything, even though some internal process can empower our customer and can benefit the customer in the longer term. That
Exactly.
makes,
Exactly.
yeah. So as we talked about that, what are the challenges and what are the Big Bang theory and how we can implement the strategy, what are some common mistakes to avoid when we are finding or creating a strategy and implementing it?
So some of the big mistakes that, and again, this is an opinion of one. Some of the strategies are so you have to the strategies don't come from a well-defined mission and vision, right? So again, let's take the example. A lot of people say, well, the strategy is to make raw revenue. No, that's not a strategy. Strategy is revenue is the output of good strategy. So you have to lay the top vision and mission laid out so that the strategies can then apply to them. So for example, if your mission is to be the best live streamed interview on the internet, one of and that's your mission, and your vision is to create a best experience. One of your strategy is make sure I have the best streaming tool, right?
Yeah.
Right, and it all flows. So if you don't have the first two, the third one you could kind of mess around with, but it may not always work. But if you have the first two defined, then the strategy will come and it flows. And what happens is some people getting to where the mistake is that people start with strategy and they don't understand that you need to understand your business before you define your strategy. And a lot of some examples in recent memory was the 10-minute clip. I even forgot the name of the product where they're trying to sell the ability to watch 10-minute clips, but they didn't understand the people that were watching them, and it just missed the mark. And lots of celebrities and lots of famous hedge fund people spent tens of millions of dollars, and it fell flat because they didn't spend the time to understand why they were doing it, why. And just because the strategy was a great tool, it didn't have the first two. So that, to me, that's the biggest mistake, is trying to do strategy before you understand those two. Um, and
Okay.
and so and vice versa. Good strategy comes from having those defined, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, it totally makes sense. So it seems like strategy is at the center, and there are so many things around it. So we need to understand the importance of vision, mission, the business, and the why. That why we are implementing this strategy, who is the customer for whom we are implementing this strategy. And probably once we understand these all the attributes, then we can define the strategy, which is center of all these different attributes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. And one of the other um, things that one of the other opportunities people miss is they don't adjust their strategy, right? So the world has changes every 6 to 12 months. They don't adjust. And not that you should change your strategy all that often, but you have to be able to use that to review what's going on around you. Um, and if you don't, you could be working on something that companies are 3, 4 generations ahead already in 12 months. So you have to always keep a pivot and look around on what you're working on.
Okay, that's an interesting. I would like to take a different question. The question is regarding that, as you have already worked in India, one of your team also operate
Mm,
from India. So you must have worked with the Asian market, India representing the South Asian market. So what is the
sure.
cultural difference that you have observed, that how countries like India and other developing countries can perform better? What are your suggestion to the companies like us? Like VectoScalar is having 100 plus enterprise grade engineers. So what would be your one suggestion based on your experience, that how we can deliver better?
So my biggest, and one of the things that I tell every person that starts in my organization, regardless of the title you have in your name, um, you're as important, and uh, your opinion is important, your experience is important. Even if you're, as you use the term, fresher, your experience is different than mine and different than somebody else's. And um, I cringe at that. It even happens in the States, but not as prevalent. That people who just start the organization feel they don't have value and they're just there to work and do what they're told. And that mentality really bothers me, because if you wanted to be a waiter, go walk in a restaurant, right? You're a human being. You have a brain. You have an education. You have an experience. You need to bring that to the table every time you show up at that table. And what I've noticed in that part of the world, people feel they'd have to have a certain title before they have the ability to give their experience. And I think if we could remove that, um, you'll have better products. And some of the what's the word I'm looking for here? The stereotypes that happen from
Okay.
that part of the world. If people that come in at any level start and I'm not saying be belligerent or be disruptive in a bad sense, but if someone says, "What do you think?" give your thoughts, because you may have a thought that that person doesn't have, because their experience is, once you've been in an industry for 20 years, it's actually bad because your thought process becomes in a square. You can't think out of it because you're in this square all the time. So getting fresh blood and fresh ideas is important for every exercise. So to bring it home, the thing that I would like for people to change is value your opinion and give it. It may not be accepted every time, but you need to bring it, because the one time may make a change.
Okay, that's made a lot of sense. That irrespective of the title, understand your importance and deliver as per that. Don't just go after the title. That unless I get that title, so unless I become a tech lead or get that kind of position, I'll perform at that level. The idea is that whatever, irrespective of your title, focus on the value that you can create for the project.
Right.
Right?
Give your opinion, but just
Yeah,
don't
give
stay
your.
quiet. Just don't sway. If you're at the table, don't stay quiet. That's the easiest way I could say it.
Okay, that's an important learning. And also, while we talked about the freshers experience, I also got to know during our initial conversation you learned to drive a manual transmission while being
Yes.
in Valley in college. So
Yeah.
what was that all about?
So I was in college. I was a starving college student. Well, I wouldn't say starving, but looking for money, looking for a free meal. So I went to a restaurant, and the restaurant said, the only position we have is a valet. And I said, okay, I'll take it. And they said, well, you have to know how to drive a manual transmission. I had no idea how to drive a manual. I said, absolutely, I can drive a manual transmission. So fast forward, that weekend, I showed up for my first shift, and first shift, no problem, all automatic transmissions. Second shift, I had like 3 manual transmissions in a row. And so I basically told the drivers, yeah, just leave it there. We're a little busy. I'll move them. And when they get into the restaurant, I mean, I had an idea of how to drive a manual. I just never had the opportunity. So let's say there's probably a few transmissions many, many years ago that may have had first and second gear a little stripped. But I learned how to do it after that. After a couple of weeks, it became second nature, and it was great. And and I guess the thing I get out of that story is, everything's scary, but you got to go do it, no matter how scary it is. Just go and try, and you're going to fail, but just keep doing it, and you'll get it right. And that's when you let fear drive your opportunities. It kind of limits you.
Listening to that story, when I'm going to some hotel or something and some valet comes up, yeah, I would think twice that
Yeah.
if that person know how
Yeah,
to actually drive.
you may want to watch if you have a manual transmission.
Stay there for some time and see what happens next. Yeah. Okay, so we have couple of question in the chat box. So Saddam is asking, can you provide example of how you helped organization achieve tangible ROI, as you talked about that
Yeah.
ROI out of digital transformation, through digital transformation? So any example of it?
Sure. So I'll give you. I'll start with a small one, which to this day I think is hysterical. So I was in an organization where there was data coming in, and it needed to be fixed by several people, and so it was on a spreadsheet, and then several people would change it, and then it would go to a final approver who would review it, and then they would email it back to the first person who sent it. And um, I just thought, and it took several days, and I just thought, and our customers were starting to get really upset and antsy, and so the natural reaction was, some of the people was like, we got to build this whole application. And I said, well, that's going to take 6 months, and we may lose our customers by then. So what's the point of doing that? So Office 360 had started around that time. And I basically said, well, why don't we just share the spreadsheet? Everybody sees who's editing, and everybody knows what's going on. You do it all at the same time. And now you have one spreadsheet, and then the person who needs it can review it and then send it out within hours. Um, so with that, we started doing that, and it started working really well. And the return on investment there was twofold. One was the current customer was astounded how fast we got at doing it, and they gave us some what's the word I'm looking for? They gave us some recommendations to some other firms that were having a similar problem, and then we ended up signing maybe 5 more customers within 60 days of doing that. So there was twofold. One was an internal efficiency. So I didn't have so many people doing this work. We went down to only the people that needed to do it. And two, we got recommendations and we got more customers. So we had maybe even doubled revenue on that product. So that's that's basically the small ROI. The large ROI is basically what the company I'm at is doing is companies spend lots and lots of money taking in exchange data, vendor data, normalizing it, stacking it, cleansing it. And I mean, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars is spent doing this across the industry. Our company takes all of that data in one place, does it all basically mechanically, except for some exceptions that happen, and we send it out. And now those companies that were spending millions of dollars to stack cleansing this data are getting a much better, faster, accurate product at the start of day so that they can actually generate more revenue and generate more customers, create more customers because their process is that much better. Um, so I can't give you numbers because it's private, but let's say it was the one was at least 100% increase in total revenue, and the latter is probably a 30 to 40% increase in revenue by the way we're doing that process of taking that data and using machines to do what humans were doing.
Okay, that sounds interesting, and I hope, Saddam, that answered your question. I have another question coming from Naman Gandhi. Naman is asking, how should one balance the need for immediate operational improvements with the long-term goals of transforming their business model? So the immediate short-term goals and the long-term goals, how do they go together?
So I I'd like to. Well, I don't know about this will work. Well, if you look at Netflix in the U.S., the way it started, and the reason I like Netflix as this model is because they did start smallish and then they grew, right? So, and if you could take that and translate that idea, and I'll walk through it. So Netflix started. So there was this big video thing called Blockbuster. You had to go to the store, and then you never returned it, and you got fees, and then it became very expensive, and people. So that became a problem. Netflix said, "Forget it. I'll just email you something. I'll mail you something to your house, and then you just mail it back. You never really have to leave, right?" So the long-term goal for Netflix was eventually to figure out digital. They knew that they were going to have to get the streaming of the movies or the TV shows to the house, right? They knew that, but they knew they had to get customers first, right? So they started with a short-term goal, which was very kind of manual, was shipping and receiving these CDs while they were working with getting to the video streaming, right? So if we take that to our businesses, we could do the same kind of concept. So if you know that you have a very inefficient process, or you know your business is going away, um, so checks used to be a big deal, but now we don't really use checks. You have
Yeah.
UPI, you can scan a check at home. Check doesn't even get in the mail. I remember used to have to get checks every 30 days from the bank. That went away, right? So if you start small with that, with okay, I want to be able to scan it, but hey, instead of sending a check, why don't you send a person using UPI the money, right? So now you reduce the checks. There's an infrastructure there. That's a key. Use infrastructure that's already available. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every day. Use the things that are available. Instead of sending a check, use UPI. and you're working in the background to be able to scan the check to put it in your account. And now you've got that done, and now you scan the check. Now you get no checks at the banks because you're either using a digital payment or you're allowing the user to scan this check into your account. And now you've removed a thing that was very expensive, and you've made customers happier because they have instant gratification of what they're doing, and you've reduced your internal processes to something to do something that's more valuable coming up in the next 5-10 years. So that's how I look at these transformations. It's yes, there's a big goal at the end, but you have to take the baby steps to get there. And if you try to do it big bang, it doesn't work. It will fail. And use suppliers and partners that are out there that can help you get there. There's no need to build everything anymore. And AWS is a big AWS, Azure. I mean, we don't buy computers for our data centers anymore, right? We use partners. Makes sense. Why do all that work if somebody has it?
That makes sense. Then I hope, Naman, your question was answered. And I'll take another question which is coming from Meha Jain. How does a company decide where to start with its digital transformation journey? So, what is the starting point for a digital transformation journey?
Well, going back to what I said earlier, for me, it's you need to define what your mission is, what your vision is. You need to understand what your business is. If you don't know your business, you can't come up with anything that's coherent. And you have to understand your business to the point where you understand what the atomic unit is, to what you're actually selling. Because how many times have companies come up with thinking they're selling X when they're actually selling Y? Thinking of Dropbox, right? Everybody thought Dropbox in the beginning thought they were selling the ability to create extra storage, but that wasn't it. Dropbox became basically a safety valve for customers to make sure they have backup, a different type of backup. So if you didn't understand what you're really doing, that atomic unit could have been totally different. You could have been selling by gigabytes as opposed to selling by user login, right? And that can make a difference on how you decide what your journey is within an organization. So start with your mission, your vision, understand the atomic unit that you're selling, create the strategy, and the rest will actually come naturally. You'll start figuring out, hey, Dropbox is actually just a big backup solution. Well, then why am I spending money on making sure that I only allow PDFs and Word documents to be on Dropbox, right? So the point is, if you don't know what you're actually doing, you can't figure out what the next step is.
Okay, so it starts from knowing your business well before taking any action or planning anything.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to know it, because if you don't know what eventually the atomic unit that you're selling, you can't define what your next step is. So, and then let's say you do all of that, and Miha's probably trying to figure out technically where you start. Um, Once you've done that, and you're very comfortable with it and you think it works, then you start looking at, to me, what I call low hanging fruit. What are the manual processes that exist in a company? Every company has a manual process. So then you figure out what that is. Is it because there's two silos? Well, maybe you got to break the silo and say, this is one group now, and that's digital transformation. Organization construction is also digital transformation, because if you have two groups creating friction internally, you got to stop that, because then you won't get going forward. Um, and then technically, go back to a simple example. In that group, is there email communication that could be done differently? Start there. And then the rest, the rest will unravel itself. Um, but I do understand larger organizations want to make bigger steps. It starts with the same thing. Know where you're going, figure out if there's a partner that can help you do it. And even if you're going to build it, maybe use the partner for the first year so that you could understand where the steps have to happen, and figure out what additional building you need to do around that. But having to say, we're going to do this big thing and be done in 2 years. I think there's plenty of Harvard Business Review cases that say that doesn't work. Start small, 30 days, 30-day projects, 60-day projects. Measure how, uh, if you have an ROI or some other measurement. ROA is not the ultimate measurement. Uh, Ford Motor Company lost electrical vehicles because they did an ROI and said EVs won't pay back for 6 years, and allow Tesla to come in and take the market in the beginning, right? So ROI isn't the king of all, but it does help to start the conversation. There are other metrics that you can use.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. While I take up the last question, it is for audience that do share your one key learning that in today's VectoScalar Tech Talk with Rocky, what did that one key learning that you attained that you are going to implement even tomorrow? So what is that one key learning? And in case you have some commendation for Rocky, definitely type in the text box below in the comment box while I take up the last question for today's session. And that question is again coming from Saddam, that what emerging technologies you are most excited about and how do you stay updated on industry trends?
So what? So I'll answer the second part first. The way I keep trends, it basically a couple of things. I listen to a lot of audio books when I'm in the car. So I have very little idle time. So if I'm in the car, I'm listening to something that's going to teach me something, or expand my knowledge on something, or to a podcast on here's the next trends for the next 12 months. So I do a lot of that. And I do a lot of reading, academic reading, even though it's not cutting edge. It provides the baseline to understand where the cutting edge stuff has come from, which is important for me. Now, to the technologies that I find very exciting now are all of the in-memory type of data stores. I know Spark has been around for a while, but there's other ones like Apache Arrow that are coming out. And the reason for that is one of the biggest problems I think we have, especially in capital markets and finance, is we need to do things very quickly and very efficiently. And going back and forth to a database of any type is not efficient. So if I could get lots and lots of memory and be able to apply a lambda to a record or a set of records very quickly to give me an output, that's very exciting to me. Um, I know everybody's looking for Chat GPT. I find Chat GPT interesting. I don't know, and exciting. Um, but to me, there's still a lot that needs to happen around that. We are doing some proof of concepts using code completion with Chat GPT, uh, or its competitors. So generative AI in general. Um, that excites me, but does it because I still want a human to understand what's coming out of that, right? To me, the human brain is the best computer. So I don't want to replace that. I just want to make it more efficient. So those are the things that make me excited technology wise.
Okay, that's great. And thanks, Rocky, for answering all the questions that we have.
Thank
And
you.
thanks for spending time with us today. Right. And just to give for the benefit of audience, people who are not aware about VectoScalar technology, VectoScalar technology is a technology pioneer established in 2012. The company today has 100 plus enterprise grade software engineers and architects, and we serve customers across the globe. And here are some of those renowned brands like Google SimSim, Kickdrum, CoinSwitch, Teleham, and more. In case you have some recommendation for amazing speakers, do there is a form in the description box below. Do suggest there and keep watching Back to Scalar Tech Talk show. Thanks, Rocky, again. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Vikas. Have a great day.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Cheers.